Thank you so much, Britt. All right, welcome, welcome. Good afternoon. I'm Angela Carter. I use they, them pronouns. I'm the program manager for Measure 110, and I will be assisting with facilitation for today's meeting, along with Keisha Dumas, one of our tri-chairs, who will be leading the meeting. The Oversight and Accountability Council welcomes and encourages community input. Members of the public are invited to submit public comments, or if you would like to get on our interested parties email list, you can reach out to oha.measure110@dhsoha.state.or.us. I've dropped that email in the chat for anyone who is interested. And that email address can also be found, along with a lot more information about the council, on the Measure 110 OAC website. If you would like more information or support with community engagement, please reach out to Jessica Carroll. I will put her email information in the chat as well. Pardon my silence, my fingers are not as nimble. So Oversight and Accountability Council members have requested that any OHA staff or anyone else present in the room today who is not a part of the council, please introduce yourself in the chat. If you would please share your role with the agency, what your subject matter expertise may be, and your pronouns, that would be very helpful. Thank you so much. All right. Let's see how many folks we have. My count, we have 9 people so far. So we might need to take just a few more minutes before having quorum for any votes. But at this point, we could go ahead and take attendance. And as folks enter the room, maybe we can add them to the attendance list. Walter, when you are ready. Awesome, thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to take us from the top. Amy, is Amy here? I don't think Amy's arrived yet. Oops, excuse me. All right, is Blue here?
Yes, good afternoon.
Hi, Blue. Carlos? Caroline?
Here.
Hey, hi, Caroline. Dharma? Okay, Aowen? Henry? Hubert?
Hello.
Hey, Hubert. Karen? Keisha is here. Hi, Keisha.
Hey.
All right. Is Lana here? Okay. Leticia? Melinda? Okay. Morgan. I think I see Morgan. Hi, Morgan. And Nicole? Okay. Onisha. I see Onisha. Hi, Onisha. Ron? I see Ron. Hey, Ron.
Ron's here.
All right. Sabrina. Hi, Sabrina.
Hi.
Okay. Zeb. Is Zeb here? Oops. Okay. No Zeb. And I see Steve. Hi, Steve. And Reginald is not here. So currently we do have 9, Angela, so we don't have enough for quorum yet.
Okay. Well, so I will leave it to our tri-chair Keisha, who is leading the discussion today, if you would like to get started with updates around the Burn Awards process, or if you would like to wait for more people to arrive. Do you have a preference?
I think we can get started and get some of this out the way before we move into presentations and things. So hopefully more people will join in time. Good afternoon, everyone. So the agenda is as follows: OHA updates. We got the grant agreement and MOU template approval. And we have conversation and a presentation around negotiations and the funding process. And then some continued data collection discussion. And we have Lines for Life conversation with Dwight and Billy. So I'm gonna turn it back over to Angela for OHA updates.
And hey guys, I
Okay.
can jump in, Angela, and I think I have the latest, if that's okay. Yeah, thanks, Angela. I just saw your, all right. Dawn Jagger, she, her, hers, Chief of Staff here at OHA, and I'm stalling to make sure I find the right PowerPoint. Oops. You guys can't see that yet, huh? Here we go. All right. Is that big enough? Yeah, okay. See folks nodding. All right, so this will be a very similar format, and sorry, my dog is breathing heavily in the background. Just senior fur colleague here. So you guys will be familiar with this format, but I have some additional components here. So just as a reminder, the subcommittees are meeting regularly twice a week. I will note that we did have to cancel yesterday's subcommittee meeting. There were some quality control issues on our end that we did not catch. So I take full responsibility for not being able to move that forward, but you will see in a later slide that I don't think it's going to cause us to have to extend any of our subcommittee meetings. We're actually ahead of schedule for other counties. But I do apologize. I just want to be really open that yesterday, due to some review that needed to happen, we canceled yesterday's meeting, which was unexpected. So this is what we have left. This is so you guys have seen a long version of this chart before, of this schedule before, and I just copy and pasted basically where we are now. And so this is the schedule as it exists. Clackamas will go to subcommittee 1 this Thursday. And as you can see, there was, because of y'all are running through some of these faster than we expected. I don't anticipate having to shift anything because we weren't able to start Clackamas on Tuesday, like I said, which it was supposed to start yesterday. The other thing that we're working to do is actually change. There was an original May 20th date, and we're actually trying to move both Deschutes and Union County up earlier. And I think we're going to be able to do that. So know that that's the only change from when I showed you guys this calendar last week. Any questions before I move to the next slide? Okay. So then this is the same list that y'all saw last time, which is this is your guys' incredible work that you guys are doing. We have 2 slides actually that encompass the counties, the county regions and applications that you guys have gone through and approved. And then after we get this information from you guys and your approval, we send out our letters of intent to award. And then, like I said last time, the next step is those applicant meetings, those welcome meetings and orientation meetings. And so like I have a little bit more detail here about those applicant meetings. So that is, we send out invitations to those county regions and applicants who are successful. And what we anticipate being able to share with the groups, depending on this meeting, your guys' decisions, is that we would have this general orientation to Measure 110, timelines, requirements, the grant agreement template, which you guys are going to go over today, a model memorandum of understanding, which also you guys were sent, and then talk through any facilitation and technical assistance support for applicants that we're able to provide throughout the process. A main difference, an addition that I added this week, because it's something that can trip up applicants, is that to receive funding, the entity has to have in place an electronic fund transfer system with OHA. And we will have the piece of paper that has to be filled out for that to happen. And we're also checking with our system because most of these entities already do have that electronic funds transfer system in place. But it is one of those steps that if it's not in place, it takes a while to get folks uploaded into the system. So it's a check that we're doing on our end to try to ensure that that's not a hiccup. But I did want to highlight it because that's something that can take up to 3 weeks to get folks loaded into our system. Yeah, Sabrina.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a clarifying question. Is the letter of intent going out 2 days after each organization is approved or after the whole county?
After the whole county, we get them out. Thanks for the question. So the applicant meetings, based on that, we're working really hard to have those applicant meetings set up within about 2 weeks or about 10 working days of when y'all approve them. And so this is a schedule of when meetings have already been put onto the books. So as you can see, we have welcome meetings scheduled tomorrow and Friday. We have the ones set up for the week of May 12th and May 13th. And then we're also working on this. And I think that I missed, in my haste, I missed a couple of the approved counties that y'all have approved or applicants that I just failed to put on, but they're all, we're working to get those scheduled, but I wanted you guys to see that progress. Any questions on that? All right, I have one more.
Sorry,
Oh.
I tried to raise my hand. I tried to raise my hand, but I was having
Yeah, no
trouble
worries.
navigating. But who's involved in those, what do you call them, welcome meetings?
Yeah, so who we will have in those meetings, and we want to discuss, we have a whole presentation on this negotiation phase. So we want to discuss this with you, but what we anticipate is, so either Steve Allen or myself, we will have some folks that we're hiring to lead some of these negotiations who will be present. We need one DOJ representative and one representative from our contracts and procurement team, and that will be kind of the OHA state team.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. All right, and I just have one more slide on the update. And sorry, I'm talking faster than usual. I just know we have lots to cover. All right, so y'all saw last week that I talked about the extension for those access to care grantees, and that we would have a communication go out last week, which did go out last week. And what we are doing is this opt-out process. So anybody who received the prior access to care grant extension will automatically be receiving that extension this time. One wrinkle that we were alerted to, which I really appreciate, is that some entities, some of the access to care grantees did not avail themselves of the prior extension. And so they were not on our outreach list for this go round. So we are doing some digging about what we can do about that, especially for those entities whose grant agreement with us had actually completed, they ended. And I think that we're going to be able to figure out a workaround to support those entities too, because we know that's unbelievably valuable, but it is just something that I wanted to, if folks are access to care grantees and they didn't receive our email last week, we're realizing that we've definitely didn't capture some folks because of that they hadn't previously availed themselves of the extension. So any questions on that? Yeah, Sabrina, is your hand back up?
Yes, it is. So you're just stating that some of the access to care grantees were not notified of the extension, so you're going to work around that in some context. Is that what you said? I just want to make sure I understood.
Yeah, so folks that did not receive the previous extension for the access to care grant, we did not send them an email. And so right now we're trying to figure out who they are, who those entities are, who did we miss? And then we will be doing reach outs and see and try to make sure that we can support them in an extension also. Yeah, Ron.
I was just going to mention that, as I understand it, some of the organizations that did not avail themselves and were kind of operating on the assumption that there was that funding for the burns. Yeah, and that kind of explains why they didn't avail themselves of the extension.
Yeah, absolutely.
But,
makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, I will stop sharing this then, because that is all the baseline OHA updates.
All right. Thank you so much, Dawn. Appreciate it. Looks like we may have a few. Oh, there's a few new people in the room, but first, Blue, please go ahead.
I just had a question about receiving the rubrics. Will it be possible in the future to receive the rubrics a little bit earlier than we've been receiving them?
We are working really hard to do that, Blue. I'm really sorry that we are stumbling on that right now. So we are working really hard to do that. I know that you guys are taking a lot of time and consideration and thoughtfulness in that. And so I'm trying my best.
Okay, thank you.
All right. It looks like we have a few more folks at this point. I'm not sure if we are quite at quorum, but I see that Zeb has joined us. Welcome in. And Melinda got here too. Hi, Melinda. Let's see. Are there any other folks that have joined since? I think that would put us at 11, which is still not quite quorum for making decisions. So again, since the next part of the conversation is a great deal of information that is necessary for making the decisions about the grant agreement template and the template for the memorandum of understanding, it might be prudent to wait a short bit longer, but I will, of course, defer to you, Keisha. But I will also say, we sent out an email, I believe it was Monday, if I am not incorrect. My days, I'm not so good at defining when one ends and the other begins. But we did send out an email to all of you with the templates for the memorandum of understanding and the grant agreement template. So those are in your inbox right now. And if you would like to pull those up and take a peek at them, this conversation will be both informational to share with you our recommendations for the grant agreement and the MOU, and also an opportunity for us to get feedback from you on those two items, with the end goal of voting to approve those two documents so that we can move forward with getting those grant agreements created with all of the different entities that have been awarded and getting them started on the process of building their MOUs with the other entities in their county to do the work that needs to be done to get the burns together. So I see we have a few more folks. It looks like Carlos just joined us. That would put us at 12. We're getting closer. Keisha, would you like to begin the conversation on these documents? Would you like to give folks a few minutes to look at them? What are your thoughts?
I mean, give them a few minutes to look at them, just in case they just got word that they received them by email.
Okay,
And we can go with the group and see if they're ready to have the discussion.
okay. And if anybody's having any trouble accessing those documents or finding them in their inbox, please let me know. I will give you the exact date and time that I sent them so that you know what to look for. Yes, so it was Tuesday, my apologies, not Monday, Tuesday the 3rd at 11:49 a.m. The documents say MOU burn draft 5/3/22, and then draft burn grant agreement for OAC review 5/3/22. If anyone is having trouble getting them, I'm happy to forward them again to you. Just let me know. I think since we're just about to hit 1:30, and it may be that some of our council was not aware of the time extension, we will probably get a few more folks here in just a minute, and then we might have enough for quorum for a vote. So I will hush up and let you all read for a moment, and then maybe we can start the conversation.
Maybe you can refresh my memory. I remember that the policies, the general policies are required. Folks are given 90 days beyond kind of the letter of intent to award to submit their documents addressing disabilities and the ADA and all those requirements under documents and under the I'm trying to remember what the phrasing is that we use for everything is going to be. It's 90 days for those documents. I'm asking if you can refresh my memory on what is the timeline for submission of MOUs.
So oh, John, I think you just took your mute off. I can leave that to you if you'd like.
Yeah, let me scroll down in the actual document for that. It's so if you have the document handy, Ron, or anyone else that's looking at this, it's in Exhibit A, Part 2, under Payment and Financial Reporting. Down below there, there's a table that has what the timelines would be for that. I think that's what you're asking about, like insurance submission and submission of policies and procedures, that kind of thing. And actually, we don't have you can see over in the, well, actually, I don't know if it got included in what you said, but the grant agreement, the MOUs are within 30 days.
Yeah, I'm not seeing that on here.
Yeah, so I'll just say it because it was in the side notes. It's the MOUs are within 30 days of the grant agreement execution. The insurance plans are within 90 days of execution. Policies and procedures are within 90 days of execution. And then the report is described in a different part is within 6 months of the grant agreement execution. So the first reporting.
Okay.
So it's all dependent on when the signatures actually get in place.
I got the separate document, not in this document.
Yeah, probably we left that blank in the document that got sent out, I believe. There's because the dates themselves have to be filled in based on the execution, but
Okay.
yeah, we can send that information out separately though.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Will be helpful. and helpful to us as well.
All right, we have hit 14. Nicole has arrived. Welcome, Nicole. So I believe we are now at quorum and have the ability to vote. For those of you who are just arriving, in the chat, there's information about what we're doing right now. We're looking at the templates for the grant agreements and the memorandums of understanding. Those were sent out to you on Tuesday at 11:49 a.m. if you'd like to look at those documents. And the goal today is to share them with you. Oh, I'm sorry. We need one more person. I apologize. 15 to vote. So we're still waiting on one more council member. But the goal today is to get your feedback on these documents and hopefully get your vote of approval to move forward with using them to create the grant agreements for the burns.
Hey, Ron, real quickly, just to add to what I was mentioning earlier on those timelines and the capturing of those MOUs that exist between the entities for a burn is really like the signal that the burn is complete. And that's when we can initiate payment also out to all the various entities where they're associated with the burn. Wasn't sure if you were wondering about that.
Going back, yeah, I was going back and forth between two. I was looking at the MOU, but I could see that the dates are blank in the grant agreement.
Yeah, we can talk about that when I get into the presentation, whenever y'all are ready to get going.
Thank you.
Looks like somebody else joined too. Did somebody else just join?
I believe that is that may have been a friend from DOJ.
Oh.
Correct. Yeah, it's Ben Eckstein from DOJ. Thank you.
Another person just joined, looked like.
Bernardino is from OHA.
Okay, well, I think we might need to get started with the presentation, and hopefully somebody will hop in the midst.
If anyone joins in the middle of the presentation, I will do my best to get them caught up with the discussion that has happened before they entered the room by text. So I think if you are ready, then that is something that we can do.
Ready?
Okay.
We have a jam-packed agenda, so we gotta get started.
What would be the most useful as far as reviewing? Do you all want these documents up on screen? Oh, there we have it. Perfect. Thank you, Don. And it is still thinking about whether or not it wants to share your screen. Perfect.
Thanks. And yeah, this is John Collins, Deputy Director for the Health Systems Division. And just as an FYI, so hopefully everybody does have those documents on hand. And we're not going to, in the actual presentation, we're not going to review them line by line, but obviously if someone has questions about any of the particular parts that they want to bring up, that we can do that. What I was going to do for the both the grant agreement and the MOU template is just give you an overview in terms of how they're laid out. Sometimes that can be kind of confusing if you're not used to looking at these, and also highlight the areas where, I mean, there can be input anywhere, but highlight the area where we really are hoping for direct feedback from OAC. So, all right, next slide, please. So the grant agreement itself is made up of two parts, or two basic parts. The first part is what I refer to as the opening recital. That basically just gives you information about who the agreement is between, what the timeframes of the agreement are, and we will, in a different part of today's various presentations, we'll talk about the timeframe that we're wanting to settle on for these grants. But it includes the timeframes and then the amount of funds. So in the case of the various entities that we might be working with in a given county, this will be the actual amount that they're being awarded to do the things that are in the grant agreement. And then this second large set of this second big section is basically made up of the exhibits and subparts. That basically describes at a high level what is expected of the grantees in terms of being a grantee, and also in terms of the activities that we're expecting them to do. The program description part, which is a part that I'll go over in a little bit more detail in just a second, is really what we expect them to do with the funds. These are the activities of the burns. But also within these exhibits and subparts, it includes information about how payments will be received and how often. There is a section referred to as special terms and conditions. In that section, it discusses how to handle purchases of vehicles or property, major renovations, that kind of thing, how that needs to be handled. And then a section referred to as standard terms and conditions. This is a lot of boilerplate language that's associated with legal requirements around insurance, maintenance of records, how disputes might be handled if they end up arising between, for example, OAC, OHA, and the grantee, things like that. It's a lot of boilerplate language. And really everything except for the program description are kind of the mechanics of how the relationship works, whereas the program description itself, again, kind of gets into the guts of the expectations of the grantee in terms of the actual work. Can you go on to the next slide? So in that program description section, which is the part I'd really like you to dive into.
And we have a question in
Yeah.
chat.
Yes, Sabrina, could you expand on that a little bit?
That was a different conversation. I was talking to somebody about a number in the MOU and I didn't put it to them. I put it to everyone. I apologize.
Oh, that's okay. Because I wasn't sure how I was going to answer you anyway. All right, so within the program description, and that starts off, just in case you're, again, orienting yourself, is Exhibit A, Part 1 of the agreement. Within that, there are several different sections. First of all, it starts off with information that's general information around the background and purpose and activities associated with the grant. So this is where we're describing, you know, the Measure 110, the subsequent law that was created based on that measure, and why we are creating burns and what they are intended to do in the community. So it has all of that kind of description, making references, again, to statute, and in some cases to some of the administrative rules that y'all have put in place that describe some of those things more specifically. Then it gets into grant activities. In this section, it ends up making reference to each of the different elements of a burn. So again, in looking at the rules that y'all have created, you created a set of rules associated with screening and assessments, comprehensive behavioral health needs assessments, peer counseling, etc. Some of the grantees will be doing all of those things. And if that's the case, all of these references and the activities to OARs will be put in there. If a particular grantee is only doing screening and assessments, that will be the only part that's in the actual agreement. So this will change depending on what exactly the grantee was approved to do. But the important part to remember here is that the services that are being asked for and described are all based on the rules that the OAC worked to develop and to describe those particular services. Oh, and one thing I want to mention before I forget, as you're screening down through some of the parts that I'm not going to go over in as much detail, in Exhibit A, Part 3, there's a reference to background checks. I want to let you know that that was a part that we meant to delete from this. It was from an earlier draft, and it was kind of a question as to whether or not any inclusion of background checks needed to be in the document. They do not, so that part will be wiped out from this and not included in future drafts. Apologize that we didn't get that deleted before we sent to you. So getting back to regular programming here. So after we go through grant activities, the next pieces that pop up are reporting requirements. And the reporting requirements include things such as what needs to be kept on hand at the grantee's office location related to financial information and record keeping, and what kinds of data requirements are going to be. With the data requirements, the reason why I highlighted this in the presentation is because I have a whole nother presentation that gets into some of the details of that. Next slide, please. And then the final three sections of the program description go through performance requirements. The performance requirements are expectations that are there from the get-go for each of the grantee and include things such as making sure that they're using evidence-based practices or tribal-based practices or both to meet community needs, doing things like assuring that the clients who are Black, Latinx, Native American, LGBTQIA, 2S+, etc., veterans, that they all, that the services are culturally and linguistically specific and responsive to those individuals. Those are things that are required of everyone and are expected to be there from the get-go. As you move down through that and get to the grant milestones, this describes some expectations, and it's actually some of the information that Ron and I were talking about prior to me getting into the presentation about submission of insurance plans, policies and procedures, and what the timelines are associated with that. So the main difference between the performance requirements and the grant milestones is performance requirements are things that are expected, again, from the start, whereas grant milestones are things that will be submitted as we progress through the timeline associated with the grant. And then the final section of this just again has to do with the financial reporting and record keeping piece. So yeah, so that is the overview in terms of how the grant template is laid out, and what I'm really hoping that y'all had a chance to review and can maybe ask questions about if you have them. We can go from there. The next section we'll get to is the MOU, and I'll pause before we move to that to see what kinds of questions y'all had around the grant agreement template. And if there's anything popping up in the chat, I can't see it. So
Lou has her hand up.
So I just had a question of something that I saw in the grant agreement, which is about terminating agreements, that the OAC can do that. And there were two different scenarios, but I was wondering if that's a process that we have to create, or if there's already a process in place for how that would come about if we felt it was necessary.
That is a process that's outlined in here. I mean, what you're getting to is in, let's see, what is that section? It's in Exhibit B under the standard terms and conditions, and section 8, default remedies and terminations. This is standard language. This basically describes the process for which we have to take care of any kind of terminations or offer remedies or whatever. So this actually describes what would be expected of the OAC and its work with a grantee. Are there particular parts of this that you're not comfortable with, or?
No, I'm just confused. Is it something that I can just say at a council meeting and then we would discuss that, or I don't understand how that would come about, if that makes sense?
Yeah, well, basically we would have to follow the rules, like for example, with termination, and you would just have to basically bring it up. As it says here, at the sole discretion of the OAC, they may terminate the agreement. And that's kind of almost like another condition here in Oregon around right to work. You can basically terminate people's employment. The OAC can terminate. It would have to basically follow these steps that are associated with the termination, since this is the agreement between OAC and the grantee. So yeah, in terms of somebody bringing that up on the council, that might be something that y'all want to discuss separately, like what are the conditions or when's the right time to bring up that kind of thing for discussion. But if you did bring it up for discussion, these would be the steps that you'd have to follow that are outlined in the standard terms and conditions. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Are there any other questions?
Ooh, we got quorum.
Welcome,
All right.
Leticia.
Well, if you want, we can go on to this next slide and we can come back to any questions you might have on the grant agreement as well. There's just one
Hey,
more
John.
slide. Yes.
I think Ron just put his hand up. I know you can't see it, sorry.
Okay.
I guess the thing I'm trying to find is the kind of the grant length timeline.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's not inserted in there right now. I forget who's doing the presentation, but there is a presentation later on that describes what our recommendation is associated with the timeline. And I don't know if we want to get into that discussion right this minute, but basically
I'm just looking for, is that baked in somewhere at the beginning, or?
Yeah, it would end up going into that very first section that I refer to as the recital section. That's where the actual amount of dollars, who the grant agreement is between, and how long it's going to last. That's where that'll end up being plugged into.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, well, so real quick, the MOU template, which should have also been sent to y'all separately, I want to emphasize what we're doing here is creating a template that can be used by the entities that are forming a burn. It's not required to be, you don't have to use this particular template. You can develop your own, or the grantees can develop their own, but we thought it would be helpful to provide a template since there are certain things that have to be statutorily addressed in the MOU, so that's why we set it up the way we did, and with all the blanks that need to be filled in. And as you can read here on this particular slide, the MOUs have to address these particular bullet points, and the source for that information is that referenced administrative rule. So the way that's the simple story behind the template that was created and shared with y'all. is just a kind of a head start for folks so that they didn't have to work from scratch and they would have all the details that they needed. And they can certainly work internally with each other to make some modifications as long as it still had these required bullet points here. So that's the idea behind the MOU. All right, so again, any questions back to the grant agreement or about the MOU? Happy to dive into any details you want to.
Sabrina, and then Blue.
Yeah, hi. Mine is referencing to page 2 of the MOU. And what my concern or my question was about bullet point 4.1.6. And it talks about meeting with community mental health programs, serving each of the counties in the burn service area to coordinate service and discuss strategies to effectively serve persons with substance use issues. I was just wondering how that came into play and how that, I mean, I just don't remember really talking about that in the implementation of the application and stuff. And so I just wanted to know what other people's thoughts were around that.
Okay, and Allison, is that something that you can comment on?
Sure. So we're looking at page 2 and 4.1.6. So I believe that this was added as a result of one of the comments from one of the earlier meetings. But again, this is part of a template that provides some sample language. So, it's not required to be in there. And if the council wanted to, we could, remove that from the template.
Thank you very much. I'm interested in removing it, but of course with OAC's input, I just wanted to throw it out there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sabrina. Blue.
So I have a couple questions or notes that I had written. So the first one was in 4.2, it talks about the 24/7 phone line as being a requirement for the burns. And there have been earlier documents showing that the statewide line could provide the 24/7 phone screenings if necessary. And so, but the way it was reading to me was that it needed to be one of the agencies within that county. And so does that language still allow for flexibility for the smaller counties that maybe cannot at this time stand up their own 24/7 phone line?
Again, you're referencing the MOU, right, Blue?
Yes.
Allison? I know while Allison's getting off mute there, I mean, our intention, as we've been talking about, is to have a statewide potentially, but yeah, I'll let Allison answer the specifics here.
I was looking at the grant agreement language. So could you repeat the question with respect to the MOU?
Yeah, so in 4.2, it talked about the 24/7 phone line being provided by an agency that's within the burn. So I didn't know if whoever runs the statewide line would be considered part of a burn if that burn did not have their own 24/7 phone line. The language just looked as though it really won't. I think ideally there's a want to have it locally, but I know for some smaller counties, that's not going to be possible at this time. It doesn't seem like it will be.
So I think the language here. Oh,
go ahead. Sorry. Nope, you're good.
So the language here just mirrors the language that's from the rule, and I believe that's from the statute. And so if there's a question about how that is interpreted, we could definitely look at that and then make sure that the language across all the different documents that's using similar language is consistent.
Yeah, I think the goal here is to at least that there's agreement amongst the various entities making up the burn that there is going to be access to a phone line. And like Allison said, we can look at whether or not the statewide one that might be available is sufficient, or if there's expectations for one locally. Ron?
I just wanted to be, just kind of circle back on, so just in terms of the MOU being, that the template is being provided if you need it, but it's not about an entity or a burn can develop its own MOU, or are they required to use the actual template that we provide?
They can use their own MOU. They just need to, again, have, you know, in the slide that was up earlier, there are several things that are required to be in the MOU. So as long as
that are required or in the MOU, it would be sufficient.
correct.
But they're not required to address all the elements that are in the template. I don't know if that's clear or made clear.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I think we had just a couple of examples of those just now. So yeah, the MOU example that we provided has information in it beyond just those 7 or 8, 9 elements that need to be included.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Hey, Ron, we could put I just put this in the chat, but this is Dawn. We could put a big disclaimer on the MOU because that is something we want to make sure is very clear. This is just something we're offering. We could do like a, you know, a watermark or whatever they're called about that.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Blue, do you have another question?
Yeah.
Yes, I do. So in the MOU in 4.2.6, we reference substances that cause harm, and that's not always the language that is used. But my bigger issue is that I work with people every day that use substances, and I don't know what that means. I don't know if that means somebody that has gotten an abscess, somebody that has gotten HIV from sharing needles. You know, the war on drugs itself causes harm, and I would not know how to interpret that particular statement. I know that that statement is in the rules, and I am opposed to that being in the rules, but I would like for folks to define that and maybe just think about whether or not that's language that we need, because the grant agreement does say services are available to all who need and want access, and it does not specify at that level.
Well, yeah, again, I mean, the language that we're providing here is meant to be examples of how the MOU could end up looking. There are certainly sections that can end up being rewritten, again, as long as it meets the basic requirements that were in the earlier, on the earlier slide. I think you can make changes to, or whoever is working to set up the MOU amongst the various parties for a burn could certainly make some changes to the language as long as it still met the basic requirements.
Yeah, and I think the message behind the language is that not stigmatizing all people who use drugs, because not everybody who use drugs, you know, have a problem. But we're targeting those who do have a problem and who we're trying to help with resources, not the global people that use drugs, but those who are impacted.
I think if the council would like us to change the language in this example MOU, we can certainly do that, as long as it doesn't conflict with the way the rules are written.
Sounds good. Blue, did you want to add more to that?
Well, no, I mean, I'm curious how folks are defining that, if they're okay with that and what that might mean to them, because it is confusing to me. So I'd love to hear from other council members on how they would define that.
I'm kind of going with John's point that it's already defined in the rules.
Is there a reason though that just because it's in the rule, does it have to be in our template MOU? Because again, this is just the example. So I don't rate, like, it still is in the rule. And so I just want to, Allison, can we remove it from the?
I think just not changing the intent of what it's for.
Right. So if we just remove that provision from the MOU, just everybody needs to know it still is in existence though, in the rule. So it's not like that requirement goes away.
Yeah, so one thing that we could do is instead of quoting that language, we could just include a reference to the rule. So it would say, describe how the signatories will provide the services described in 944-001-0020, and then we include the citation. So that would be another way to cover that in the template. But I think the idea is just that there's a placeholder to make sure that that particular required element is, I guess, is addressed in the document somewhere.
Thank you.
Blue, and then we gotta, we have a pressing agenda. So Blue, and then, yeah, moving on.
Just had one more quick question that was, there's a reference in 4.5.2 around case management. And I was just curious, I know that with peers, we have really specified and called out which type of peers, and I didn't know if there should be anything around people having, I think there is a certification for case managers. I don't know if that's something that we would want, but there's definitely like some other call outs that are very specific for certain positions. And it just felt a little bit vague to me.
Again, Allison, how is that tied to the requirements of what's contained within the MOU?
Sure. So these categories are taken just straight from the rule that's cited. So that's 0020 sub 4. And I think that this is talking about the requirements for the MOUs to address how peers and other staff will be incorporated into the services. So if there's a concern of how this is worded, then we can certainly take a look at that. We could also just, include a placeholder here without the specific categories laid out that would allow the different burn entities to fill it out on their own using, using their own language, not necessarily like the sample language. So that's another option if you'd like that instead.
Yeah, and I want to be careful of using 100 different languages. We need to be using the same language and understanding what we're talking about. When we start, changing language and everybody defining it for themselves, it kind of sometimes can get away from the intent. Just a comment.
So, one other quick comment I'd like to just make, and we can talk about it again now or in one of the other presentations, but there was several of y'all asked about how long these agreements would be in place. And the recommendation that we're making at this point is to put in an end date for all of them, regardless of when they start, of June of 2024. So that would be almost anywhere from probably 2 years to 18 months for everyone. That's our recommendation. It gives everyone an opportunity to really kind of get ramped up and for us to have collected a decent amount of data in terms of the program and for y'all to have worked with the community, with the providers, the various burns to understand how well they're operating. It would also give us time to potentially look into what our next solicitation, if that's the way y'all decide to go, might actually look like. Again, enough time to kind of generate feedback and understanding of how well things are operating under the current conditions.
That sounds good. I like that.
So maybe I can just offer this is Dawn, what we're probably gonna look for here, and John, kick me under the Zoom table if I'm getting this wrong. But so what I think we're hoping to do is probably have a vote on the length of term of the grant based on what we just proposed, a vote based on what John's going to next present about data that would be collected, and then a vote about, can we move this draft grant agreement forward and draft MOU template forward to start the negotiations. That does not just, that last vote about moving that forward does not mean that's the final, right? There will still be signatures needed and we're going to talk to entities, but those would be the 3 votes on this topic that we would look for today, if that makes sense. John, did I get that right? Awesome.
Thanks, Don.
Yeah.
Can you repeat those 3 votes real fast again?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I can just write them down too. So 1 would be on length of term of the grant agreement. 2, validating data reporting approach that John will present. 3 is moving forward the grant agreement MOU templates into negotiation. And that's in the chat now. Yeah, Ron.
Got it. Oh, sorry. Go, Ron, and then I'll go.
Yeah, my only question about the timeline, it's a timeline question. So going through 2024, I mean, I was just thinking about the funding cycle and the legislative appropriation cycle. Could you talk that through a little bit in terms of the next legislative session would be 23, and they'd be appropriating money for 23-25. So we would be landing in the middle of that with the 2024 timeline. So I'm just trying to think that through.
Yeah, I think at some point it would make a lot of sense to bring our budget folks in and kind of talk about how your budget for these services is structured. I mean, because what you have is ongoing revenue that's being generated by cannabis sales that continually go into the fund that supports the burns and maybe other services down the line. And what they'll work on is projections in terms of the next biennium. And depending on how sales are going, those projections will either go up or down or maybe stay about the same. Regardless, though, because these are classified as other funds, as opposed to state general funds or federal dollars, they can carry over into the next biennium. So, the team, and again, there'll be a presentation down the line about this, that it's involved in the negotiations. One of the things that they'll work on is, how much money is needed for the agreement for the time period that will end, if you guys agree to it on July of 2024. We anticipate that the funding, while it could go up, it could go down, or it could stay about the same, that it'll probably stay roughly the same, so that we should be able to anticipate and have the funding necessary to basically project into the next biennium what the needs are. But it would be good, once we sort through a lot of these details, for probably somebody to come in here and kind of talk through that with you all, so you can have that in front of you and that level of understanding.
All right, I had a comment and then Blue's after me. I'm a little confused around the length of time of the grant agreement when we already voted on the length of time of the grant agreement. Is this separate from the RFP proposal for the grant agreement, or why would we be voting on a different timeline that we already voted on?
I would have to go back and reference the solicitation to see how that was described, but I don't remember if we said, propose a budget for a given period of time, but that's all we were doing with them. We were saying, hey, what is your budget? What's the period of time associated with this? And let us know what that is. And that actually acts as really good information for us in the negotiation process that we'll talk about shortly, to work out the actual budget with them. The actual terms of the grant agreement, in terms of how long it is not settled until we enter those negotiations and enter those dates into the relevant sections of that grant agreement. I think one of the other issues that we're dealing with here is, I mean, by necessity, in terms of the process we have outlined, all the grant agreements are going to be starting at different times. It would be of some administrative convenience for them to all end at the same time. So again, we all know, looking into the future, when a potential changeover might occur, and y'all can plan for how you want to handle that, whether you want to just do a renewal of all the current agreements, or if you want to do another solicitation and possibly bring in a whole nother set of providers. It just works out well that way. So I guess the short answer, sorry if I was talking through this too much, was that there's not detail in there in the proposal about when the actual grant agreement would end. It was more about proposed budget for a particular period of time, so that we had a sense for what they were talking about. Does that help, Lakeisha?
Not really, but
Can I offer, hey Keisha, can I offer something? So I think that because we are now doing all of these applications on a rolling basis, right? We're not moving forward all grants at the same time, which we had talked about doing previously. Everything's on a different time scale. So some entities are going to sign their grants with us on, let's pretend June 1st. And another entity who can't get their MOUs together wouldn't sign an agreement until October 1st. And what presents a problem is if they are all on a 1-year time frame, they all end at different times. And so what we would encourage and recommend is that actually, regardless of when they start, you have the same end date for everybody. That's the shift.
And so I guess that's what I thought we already voted on. And so I'm a little, I guess. So is it about voting on length of time or end date?
End date. So it would be an end date, so that regardless of the length of time, right, it isn't just a standard year for everybody, it's an actual end date for everybody.
Thanks, Dawn.
All right. And then Lou had a question.
Yeah, I think part of it was kind of just answered. So I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly. This means like with the next round of funding, we will again have to vote on an end date for those agreements. Is that correct? Like we're not putting anything, we're not basically voting on anything that would affect the next round of funding in terms of how long organizations are funded.
Correct. Your main concern will be making sure that the solicitation, however you end up handling that next time, is set up in such a way that you don't create any gaps in terms of services. So you'll want to set it up so that you have time to get the solicitations, scoring, again, however that's ends up being designed and such, so that whether it's a whole new set or whether you're just carrying over or whatever, basically starts in July of 2024, if y'all accept the date that we proposed. So you're not voting on anything in the next time.
So we got Ron and Zeb.
Right, I was just kind of going over the three things that we have to move today. The first one being approval of the template for the grant agreement that includes the MOU. And I was going to make a motion that we approve those. So I'm making that motion now. To approve
Second. The grant agreement and the MOU. Second. Any discussion?
I think Zeb raised his, and then
I'll just say,
sorry.
All good.
that's all right. Yeah, I think I'm definitely on board with voting for that motion. And I was just going to say really quick, I support that proposed date of June 30th, 2024. I think that's a good idea, especially with the amount of due diligence that we've been doing. But yeah, I'm ready to vote on this motion that Ron just put forward.
Yeah, and I hold my comment. This is for something else. Amy, did you want to have discussion on this?
Yeah,
Or is it something else?
it was on this vote. I just want to make sure that we understand that what we're voting on, that the MOU is contingent, is able to be changed or modified according to each entity. It's just a template.
Yeah, including
Yeah.
all the elements though needed in the MOU.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Mhm.
Okay, perfect. I'm ready to vote.
I don't see any more hands. Walter?
I got my hand up.
Oh, okay, go ahead, Zip.
I just wanted to know, like, to bring it up, like, do you guys think that's going to cause any type of potential delays if we don't have a uniformed template that everybody's following? Do you guys, I mean, could that cause problems with delays with so many different interpretations?
There's a 30-day time frame on submitting MOUs.
I don't know, that might be a John or somebody else, Don question, answer.
Yeah, Ron's correct. I mean, there is a 30-day piece in there, so hopefully it doesn't create delays because there is timelines associated with that. It's part of the milestones.
Yeah, what I would offer though, Zeb, is that these burns are brand new. So while I wouldn't describe it a delay of not requiring the use of the MOU template, and I'm not advocating for that, like it is going to be substantial conversations among entities that have never worked together to come to an agreement and have a MOU. So I don't think that this decision is going to prolong, but I do think that I want to make sure everybody's aware that that process is new amongst many entities. And so that is absolutely going to be a big deal and necessary and absolutely part of the values of what you guys put forward, but it is a big deal.
And this is John. Can I just check really quickly on what the motion is that you had proposed, Ron? There were a couple of suggestions around some language changes, you know, instead of using particular terms, making reference to the rules and things like that. The watermark, I think that Don suggested in terms of making sure that it's understood that this is just a template. Were you including that in your motion or?
Yes.
Thanks.
Hi all, this is Jessica. Can we get that motion restated? Please, Ron.
I don't know that all the suggestions.
The motion is to approve the template for the grant agreement, which includes the MOU that base and with the discussion, which includes the discussion of removal and watermark that we had today.
So to John's point, I think it was another thing on the table from Sabrina around the CCMHs and.
That was what I said, with removal of the elements that were suggested and the inclusion of a watermark and a disclaimer.
So that all elements, because some I didn't agree with.
So
some I didn't agree with. So
capturing the elements. Allison captured the elements to be removed. Is that right, Allison?
We didn't have a consensus. It was some talk.
I'm waiting on Allison.
I have some notes about what we discussed, but I'm not sure whether there was consensus about which way we wanted to go. We talked about some of the different options. It'd be great to have some direction about how you wanted to change those parts, if at all.
Okay, my recollection, and I'm just one person. Everybody else chime in. We're in the discussion phase. We have a first and a second. Sabrina had suggested removing the language around the community mental health programs. There was a suggestion from Blue regarding removing the language addressing regarding substances that cause harm. There was a suggestion from Don to add a disclaimer stating that this is only a template that can be used and it can be modified and you can use your own. And those are the three that I remember. I don't believe there were more.
I had a comment and then Carolyn has a comment. I just don't, I don't really want to remove the substances as cause harm statement. But Carolyn, on you.
So John and Don, I just wanted to make sure.
Okay, go ahead.
This applies to, this does not apply to the tribes, right? Because we've always negotiated different with our agreements.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Hubert.
Oh,
So,
Go Hubert.
how you guys doing? So what I'm hearing is that there's a lot of flexibility in this template for the burns to be able to make changes to be able to operate what they need to operate, to be able to do what they need to do as far as providing services, as long as they stay in the guidelines of what the rules are. Am I correct?
You are correct.
So if that's the case, then I don't see any problem with us voting on this and let's move forward, because all of this is new, right? And so as we move forward as a council, we're going to be able to change things and come and talk about things that's working and what's not working as we move forward, as the new burns come on. Because we're not inventing the wheel on services here. We're just trying to fund the services to new burns. And I think what has to happen is that we need to be able to have some kind of structure in place to move forward with getting this streamlined over time. And that's what over time we're gonna up out there and, oh, well, that's not working very well. Can we, add this or remove that as we go forward, right? Because there's a lot, I want to give some of this comes, right? So I think we're on the road. We just need to be able to understand that it's always going to be some stuff we're going to say, oh, maybe this will work better, or oh, maybe this is not working so well. And that's why we meet. That's why we meet as a council and we talk about these things. So that's just my opinion on this.
Thank you. Carolyn, was your hand back up? Or it never went down? Yeah.
Do we have a motion on the table?
We do have a motion.
We do.
And we're in discussion around the motion. I agree with everything but removing the statement about people who are harmed by drugs. That's the intention.
Are you ready to vote?
I am.
Okay, let's start from the top. Amy, how do you vote?
Yes.
Oops, sorry about that, Amy. Thank you. Blue?
So I'm kind of confused of it. I'm sorry, you guys. So if we're gonna remove the statement or not, so what am I voting on? Because it sounds like there was still discussion about people saying they didn't agree with that part of it. So what are we voting on right now?
Okay, so I'm going to restate the motion.
Let's do it.
So I am making a motion that we approve the template for the grant agreement, which includes the MOU with the modification of the language around community mental health programs being removed, and adding a watermark with a disclaimer stating clearly that this is a suggested template and all elements are not required, period.
Yeah.
What do you mean all elements are required?
I didn't say all.
Impacted by the use of drugs?
No, for the MOU template, that if somebody chooses to use the template, they can. If they want to change the MOU, they still have to have all the elements of the template requirements in that MOU, like all the different services.
There's still flexibility in being able to modify it to where it fits to your burn or your program. Am I correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Second?
I second it.
Yeah,
So if,
so that's good. Right, I like that.
okay,
That's good.
so we're voting now to keep it like this where they can change.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Any further discussion?
Nope.
Paula?
Let's go. All right. Amy, how do you vote?
Yes.
Okay. Blue?
Yes.
Okay. Carlos?
Yes.
Caroline?
Yes.
Dharma? Oops. Erwin? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Is Henry here? He's not. Hubert?
Yes.
Okay. Karen is not here. Keisha?
Yes.
Okay. Lana is not here. Leticia?
I vote yes.
All right. Melinda?
Yes.
Okay. Morgan?
Yes.
Okay. Nicole?
Yes.
Right. Onisha? Thanks, Nicole. Onisha?
Yes.
Thanks, Onisha. Ron?
Yes.
Okay. And Sabrina?
Yes.
Awesome. Thanks, Sabrina. Zeb?
Yes.
All right. That passes with 15 for the motion. And I'll turn it back over to you, Keisha and Angela.
I would like to make a motion that we take a 5-minute break because it is a long meeting and I imagine that there are bio needs. What do you all think of that?
When we return, could we have staff bring the vote that the council made regarding timeline a couple months ago? That we had a vote regarding grant funding timeline.
The length of time that the grants would be
Yeah.
awarded.
State that at the begin that conversation so that people are clear about what we're talking about. This is what
Okay.
Lakeisha's talking about, the vote that we already.
Yeah. That would be good, Ron. Thank you.
We can do that. Oh, Amy, did you have a thought before break?
Well, I kind of did have a thought, a question I know we're going to take a break, but when you're saying the timelines, and then we're voting to change the timelines possibly, stop. Is to the 6/30/24? Is that what am I confused or what?
Oh, okay.
What's
So
the,
We can bring
Yeah.
that back. We will make it clear, Amy, for everybody when we get back.
There's an OHA recommendation on a timeline that we're going to discuss when we get back.
okay, all right, because I'll have a question. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you all. See you in just a few minutes. Let's do 2:36. 5 minutes.
Hi, Henry, welcome.
Hey, Ron, is everyone taking a break?
Yeah, we just took a short break.
Okay.
Only thing that's happened so far is we got three things that we have to move today. One was to approve the template for the grant agreement that includes the MOU. We just did that. And now we're going to move into a conversation regarding a recommendation from OHA regarding the timeline for the end date for the grant period. And then we're going to have to move a question around the reporting requirements, data reporting.
Okay. Thanks for getting me caught up. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no
What about
worries.
the phone?
What about the what? Henry? I'm sorry, Hubert?
What, are we doing the phone line today?
There will be a discussion. I'm not sure if there's something to move on that.
What did Hubert ask?
We do, Ron, on the phone line. We really have to continue that conversation on that extension.
Okay.
Right.
And my apologies for us taking a second. We wanted to make sure we got you guys the information you needed.
Thank you, Don.
Do we need to take attendance after this break, or do we just want to jump back in?
We have another member who's been able to join us. Henry is here. I will do a quick head count and just make sure that we have everyone in the room.
Yeah, because we're 20 minutes to where we're the line to life is supposed to be, but they know that we might have ran over. But we really got to get these votes in.
Yeah, quorum.
Yeah, we need to push through and get.
We're good. Angela, we're good with
Okay.
quorum.
Okay.
So I'm happy to dive into the question related to the length of term.
Okay.
Okay. So the RFG, and I'm going to ask my DOJ friends to make sure I'm getting these dates right. So what we requested of the applicants was to propose budgets for a contract period of February of 2022 to June of 2023. And that was obviously when we all had assumptions that we could run through this process faster than we are. And so what we are proposing is based on, and this is, you guys have the authority to do this, is extending that grant agreement and having them all end, like we said, June of 2024. And one of the considerations I would just have, if I were you guys, in the back of my mind is how long it takes for us to develop a new grant process and then backtrack to whenever this ends of whatever it is that you guys would be doing. So that would be our recommendation, is moving that out to June of 2024.
Yeah, I'm just wondering around what we asked the applicants for and what has changed, and we don't really have that information. All we have is the information in which the time period they provided. So I don't see pushing it out, and that's a whole nother pot of funding, but I don't know.
Yeah, Keisha, the way I think about it though is that no matter what, the applicants have to reassess the budgets that they submitted, because these agreements obviously did not start February of 2022. And so that thought process is going to have to happen.
So how would that change when we also voted that some possible organizations might get the funding for that full length of time? I just don't know the factors that's included in that, but that was the vote we made, even though we're getting the money out late, that some of that might be backfilled by this.
Yeah, we can't retro. Allison, do you want to comment, or John, about we can't retro pay?
Yeah, we can't retro pay for a grant agreement that wasn't in place. So in other words, we wouldn't be able to pay for something that maybe they did back in March of 2022. So it has to go from that point, from the point in which the agreement is made forward.
Okay, because that's a different conversation that we had before around this in the time.
Right.
of
and that was,
voting. That's
why I
totally
asked-
different.
Yeah, that's why I asked for.
So I'm kind of curious about how this works with the budget, right? So every fiscal year, when funding comes, like when legislatures then vote on the budgets, is that when we'll know every time how much funding we have to be able to give out for grants?
Well, here's the thing. The thing I'm keep driving at is the vote that we took earlier, which was to approve 18 months of funding.
Right.
Even if the current cycle ends on June 23, they would still get 18 months of funding. That was the vote in my mind that we took.
Mine too.
All right. So even if it falls after the fiscal budget year, if it doesn't fall in that, because they're going to be voted all the time for a new budget. You understand what I'm saying? So
yeah, this will end at this current budget cycle, the June 2023, right, Ron? Right. All right.
That's what the OHA is talking about today is instead of butting up against trying to squeeze everything into June 23, we could go out further and give them additional months is the way I'm seeing it.
Right.
But they just
so
said,
how can we get,
but I'm just wondering because we can't, I'm a little confused. I just don't want to bump into, I don't want to move into the other budget cycle. Like, I just want to get past this, get the people their money and make this process easier for the next time around, but not like bump into the next cycle of funding. We already know how much we have in this cycle.
This is what John was talking about earlier in terms of the nature of the funds being other funds. But what it didn't do for me was address the legislative appropriation, because these funds are not what I would call continuously appropriated. They have to be reappropriated every session, every full session.
Right.
And that's what I'm trying to understand.
Yeah. And that's what I'm trying to understand too, because if we're going to have to put a process.
So Donna's shaking her head and frantically waving.
Nope, let John talk to this because I think we have some misinformation.
And then Sabrina's up after John. And then
the funds associated and the fund that was created, and I apologize for, I can't remember the exact title they gave the funds, it is something that rolls from biennium to biennium. They don't have to reapprove it. It's created in statute. So there will be funding that'll be available next biennium. The amount of funding will depend on how much revenue is generated through the marijuana tax sales, and that gets plugged into that fund. So there is no doubt, unless the statute is changed, that you will have funding, and it'll probably roughly be about the same amount as you had this biennium, give or take, depending on the forecast. But again, that's why I think it would be good to, at some point in the near future, probably give you guys a good 101 from our budget staff on that particular piece. But because of that, there is no problem, and we do this with other agreements, contracts, et cetera, of us contracting or putting a grant agreement in across biennia. There is no problem with that at all.
Thank you.
So my question would be, I apologize, but my question was going to be, are we extending the deadline with the same amount of funding? That's my confusion.
Don, you wanted to answer that?
John. Sorry. Yeah, basically in the negotiation process that we end up having with each of the grantees, we would put the end date on the grantee for July 2024, if y'all end up agreeing to that. And we would set up the budget so that it basically goes to that period of time. But I mean, we're going to end up probably paying folks on mostly a quarterly basis. There'll probably be some exceptions based on the one-time funds that some of the grantees requested. But yeah, it would just basically run all the way through whatever the end of the grant period is, whether it's June 2024, December of 2023, or whatever.
Deb?
Thank you. Okay, so organizations submitted budgets for 18 months, right? And the original end date was June of next year. And so what's being proposed is when the organizations that got approved, you guys can tell me if I'm wrong on this. The organizations got approved, you guys will go into the details of approving those budgets, getting out the money. But instead of through June of next year, it's going to be extended to June of 2024, the budget?
Correct.
Correct? Okay,
Yes.
Thank you.
I just have one more last question. I apologize. And then, so that means they will, no matter what, have enough funding to last until 2024 during contract process with you guys. And then you guys will add that date to the contract that we just passed and vote. Is that correct,
Correct.
John?
That's correct as well. And that will put them all on the same, going forward, that would put them all on the same schedule as well, because we'll have, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of different start dates for this first round. And the goal is to get them on the same end date so that however, the continued funding works, we'll have them all on the same pattern.
Okay, and I just had one more question, and you can answer me now or offline or whatever, but, and then in that time, we're gonna start the other new biennium contract process, because these contracts aren't gonna roll over, correct?
That is a decision that the council will need to make, yes. If you decide to do a new solicitation, we'll need to start that in time so that we get them in place by January of 2025. Or, there may be a decision that you guys want to roll these and just kind of extend them. There'll be a number of options to explore.
Thank you so much.
So I have a question.
Yeah, me too.
Is any of this changing what we voted on as far as making sure that they get their entire amount that they requested?
Yep.
And can somebody bring up the notes about because I want to hear what we voted on and how we're changing it. Like, I want it on record because we already voted on this topic. Majority ruled on what we decided. And if we're undoing the committee advisories, what they already voted on, I just think that it needs to be real clear. Because if it sounds like we already voted on this and we made a decision and now we're making another decision and we're undoing our vote. And I just want to know the process of undoing a vote. Like, why?
Hi, this is Jessica. Can I just respond to Onisha's request real quick about the previous vote that was made, I think about a month and a half, maybe 2 months, who knows anymore ago. Onisha, you all did vote, and you did vote to provide the full amount of funding, right? And end the grant agreement term on, I believe it was July 30th. Or June 30th, July 1st, 2023. I think what folks are saying here is when the organizations applied for funding, they applied with an 18-month budget, right? And so what we're saying is we're taking that 18-month budget, which will of course be negotiated, right? And just pushing that out a year, right? So I think what the difference here is a year and an amount of money, if that makes sense to you. I recall the vote that you're talking about, and you all did vote that.
The vote was
Yeah.
on March 2nd of this year, just to.
Right. And so why is it coming up again that we need to change the way we voted?
I see you, Amy. I think Don's about to respond though real fast.
It's really just a question of when we go into these negotiations and knowing everything we now know of how long this takes and where this is starting from, if you guys want to do that. You guys, we're bringing the question to you because you guys hold that power, but we now have more information than you guys did 2 months ago.
So we made a decision that due to back then on March 2nd, I think that's what Angela said, that this was the way we wanted to move forward. And now we're being challenged by you guys to change our vote, which will make the people who've been waiting have less money.
Yeah.
Well, can I respond to that?
Yeah, and then after that, Amy, after John responds.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you always had facing you as a council and looking at how you would end up funding the various applicants is the fact that, and this didn't turn out to be true, but if, for example, all the applicants say they had all been approved, I think if I recall correctly, they were asking for roughly $400 million. And you never had that amount of dollars to actually allocate out to the applicants. So there was always going to be a negotiation process in terms of the actual amount that got awarded. We would not have probably, the council wouldn't have been in a spot that they could guarantee everyone that they were going to get what they asked for in terms of the amount. So this is part of what we were going to need to do anyway.
That's not entirely accurate, because even though that's what the rubrics were created for, even though 400 million was requested, as a council, we had the direct power to go through all of those rubrics and decipher whose program was eligible for this funding and who was not, which would immediately made that $400 million decrease and get more aligned with the money that we had to give, which we did a lot of work doing. There was a lot of emotional labor to do that. And we had to tell a lot of good programs that they weren't going to get funded this biennium because they wrote poorly written proposals. And we were very strategic about funding these people and not funding those people. And some of the people that we chose not to fund had great proposals, but they made mistakes by lumping budgets of several different counties all together. You know, so we had to do a lot of emotional labor to do that, to get you to the amount of money that we have to give away. So what you're bringing up doesn't have anything to do with at all to what you're directing us to do now, which is to challenge a decision that we made on March 2nd, that those that we did agree to fund and that we do have the amount of money to fund, to not give them the full amount that we have to fund them for the full extended amount of time that we originally were supposed to be allotted in, because we were not prepared to have this money out in time.
Well, just to be clear, we're not directing you to do anything. We're offering this as a proposal for you to consider. And we're not really offering any less money to any of these applicants in terms of that you approve. We're just putting it on a different timeline, since we're essentially starting these grant agreements in the summer and fall and spring of this year, as opposed to much earlier. None of the applicants would end up getting less money than they would have gotten for the similar time frame. In fact, we're probably giving them a couple more months than they would have gotten anyway, which could end up translating into more dollars than they wanted to get out. If you look at this on a monthly, we're probably going to end up looking at the budget that they. I'm sorry, Keisha.
So I'm sorry, John, you keep explaining it. One thing though that happens is those who were supposed to come back and reapply because their proposals weren't great, or they made some mistakes that they didn't get in time. That's a whole nother year for them to be able to even jump in and try to get their program funded. And that's a battle too. And I'm gonna go to Amy.
Before my head explodes. Okay. So if I'm understanding this correct, and I get it. So everything, we've been busting our buns, we've been working hard, a lot of hiccups happened. We are late getting money out by several months, okay? Just several months, not a gajillion, but now we're at a point where what they're saying is we could extend this for everybody to get their burns up and running with the money that they're given. I think if I understood, they're extending the time to allow them to do it. Is that what I'm hearing, or is that wrong? And I just want to hear from Keisha, please. Is that wrong, Keisha?
I think that's what I'm hearing.
Okay.
That the side pot is the people who didn't get it in on time this round would have a whole nother year that they couldn't apply.
Right.
So
and that
for like
sucks.
2 years.
Right.
Yeah.
And that sucks. But like I said before, they were offered a lot of assistance to get these applications in. OHA made Zoom meetings available. They were made assistance
Right. Yeah, I
available
understand
for
that
grant
part.
writing.
But when they put in the RFP, we had an end date, right? So people thought,
Right.
By June 2023, okay, now I can do it again. To extend that again is not equitable for the people who didn't get in. That's a whole nother year.
The problem that we have is we're not equitable to the people that are funded, because I know several of the entities that wrote their proposals and got them in have to make changes to some of it now because took so long. And I get it, but it's a no-win situation, but we don't have to go with their suggested date. We can still extend our date, right? So why don't we as a council pick a date, and from the time of funding, give them 18 months? But
we already voted and picked one.
Because I know, but this date that we had voted on previously is not, it's not gonna, people are gonna they need more time to get this stuff done. That's not gonna work.
We're still working on the same timeline and what we voted to get these
So the way
out
we
by possibly
voted,
June.
the way we voted, just to be clear,
So real
is
quick though, hold on. Zeb has had his hand up forever, and Caroline.
Because I'm just concerned that what if we need to we're going to get the money out to these people, let's say by June 30th, right? People need time to implement these plans with changes that we have caused them to make. So I think we should take that into consideration.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with what Amy's saying there. I don't see how this is a negative for the programs that are getting approved this time through this extremely rigorous process, through the thousands of hours that we put in. I'm not seeing how it's less money for those organizations, unless somebody can explain that to me. I'm good. Thank you.
Caroline?
I think there's a solution for everything. So I want to make sure that I'm clear, though, is the fact there is going to be additional dollars, right? Probably in June of 2023. So there will be additional dollars if we could hold on to these dollars. And what I'm saying is because we've already been challenged with the legislature this past meeting. So if we could hang on to these dollars, there's going to be another stream of dollars coming in. What appears to be more fair, and I don't know if this is even possible because I'm not sure in terms of how the state works anymore since I've been gone so long, is can we do a contract through December of 23? And so that goes back to our 18-month period of time that appears to be more realistic if we could go into the end. Because if we did go through the December 23, then that gives us our 18 months and then we're not really losing any money. Then we would then have to reapply. The same entities could reapply for the following biennium, which will start January 1st. And any new programs would also have the same opportunity to apply because these are not base dollars. These are grant dollars. So whatever we do, we have to reapply every time. I wish they were base dollars, but they're not. So we would have to reapply anyway. And with all the lessons learned, hopefully we're not going to have to go through the same type of barriers that we went through this time. So I'm just trying to offer a different time frame, and it would still be 18 months. So can we, Steve or John, can we go into July 23 through December 23?
You could end the grants at any point you want to. Yes.
Okay, so that's another, and I think that would be another alternative. And we could still, if we get the new dollars, we still could announce them earlier to still give the same entities and any new proposals. And then that way there won't be a break if we have to start a contract January 1st, 2024.
Thank you. We got Onisha, then Ron, then Steve.
Yeah, I'm just a little puzzled at why we even have to change it at all. Because I thought that we were saying that even though the time changed, because we were late in giving it out, that we were gonna still give the people 18 months and we were still gonna keep the same dates of the cycle, of the funding cycle. That's the decision we made, and I don't understand the pressure to change it.
Because our timeline changed, because when money's not going
No, our
out at the
timeline
same
didn't
time.
change. That's not, hold on though, but we got Ron and then Steve.
Well, you add it up.
Right, I was just looking at just the timeline, just in terms of the months and kind of going forward now. And even with Don's worst case scenario of money going out in October, that would put the last payment or whatever in March of 2024. So the idea of going through, and that was just kind of put it, just numbering the months, that would go to March of 20. If we just go with, if we were just looking at money going out in June, the last payment would essentially be in October of 23. And so I think the suggestion of doing December that Caroline made is reasonable. I'm just, and I'm still considering that Don saying that, you know, we'd be getting money out to organizations, and October is the worst case scenario, and probably, you know, it's likely it would be before that, or I would encourage us to do it significantly before that. And I don't really see it affecting the money. If we continue with 18 months of funding, that's what we agreed to. But the idea of moving it all the way to, I don't see the necessity of opening it up all the way until June of 24. Oh, and just one other thing I wanted to mention. In our conversations around the initial grant period and the grant process for a second round of funding, we decided as a council that we would consider, based on performance and reporting and meeting deliverables, that we would do contracts the second round for those performing organizations and entities and burns.
Steve.
Do we have that data?
Hold on, Hubert. Steve is up. Raise your hand.
Thanks, Keisha. So offering, I think, maybe a clarification and a possible alternative. So my understanding is with these grants that there are services over a period of time. So the more services and the longer period of time, the more payments that the provider is eligible for. So as the time has shifted from what we originally envisioned, February, if we reduce the period of time to fund the programs, we would have to reduce the overall amount of that contract. So sort of a two-part desire is, one is we're just recognizing, you know, how much work it is to fund, you know, all of these organizations. And as your support agency, we want to ensure that we're not rushed and you're not rushed in this process as we look forward to the future. And, you know, whether it's 18 months or 24 months, to allow sufficient time for this process to continue, for the organizations that you fund to get their feet on the ground, to get the data back, to demonstrate their activity and their progress in achieving the goals and intent of this legislation. So I think the shortest period of time that I think would be helpful to consider is 18 months. That would take us to December 31st of 2023. want something, and I'll look to the folks, John or Allison, that you could consider if you'd like to extend it, is to have a renewal period that would be automatic, barring performance concerns, for an additional 6 months or a year, because by then you'll have, this council will have additional funds to extend, and it could be sort of an easy process to extend those for that period of time. I do get the concern about spreading the same money over a longer period of time, sort of like peanut butter on a second piece of bread, that concerned that if providers need a certain level of funding to deliver the type of services that you expect, and that there can be concerns there. So keeping it at 18 months, but perhaps with a provision to extend it easily, should you like to, with additional funds that ought to be coming in through the marijuana revenues. My 2 cents. Thanks.
Thank you. And I just have one more question around the funding. So like right now, we know how much we have in the pot and for how long we have it. The thing about it is like legislation came for us already for like 150 million this time. So we have this assumption that we're gonna have all this money. That's not a reality though. I'm just wondering what that does to if we don't get the funding we get. And then folks being able to work with, I'm just a little confused around us saying that they can't get what they applied for. Like we did not guarantee, no, it was some factors in there that is on a case-to-case basis, the amount of funding they got for the rest of the period of time. So I'm just wondering how we reverted back to say, and I do remember we saying we couldn't retro pay, but it had to be called something else. But they could get what they applied for if that was possible. So I'm just a little confused on that and expecting that we're gonna have this new money that we might not have. And this time we got the one-time opioid funds, we had some extra revenue in this cycle and not knowing what we're working with in the next cycle. Like we don't have a preview. Jessica, Onisha, Zep.
Yeah, I think, Keisha, you just really kind of hit on something, is that, there might be a worry that there might not be, funding might not get renewed, right? And so if you are allowing organizations to have a little bit more time to spend that amount of money, like when an organization puts in a budget for, say, staffing for 18 months, and then we try to squeeze that into 12 months, that could put an organization in a situation where they have to spend down that money really quickly and it's not actually going to the staffing. Does that make sense?
I'm not sure, no. I don't know if we lost Jessica or.
No, sorry, couldn't find mute fast enough. I'm just saying, as a person who used to run a grant program, at the end of the grant, if you have money left over that you haven't spent, you get in this mode of I have to spend down these dollars, right? And that can oftentimes come with risk, right? Because you're trying to spend money quickly. Does that make sense?
I mean, it kind of makes sense. And then on the flip side of that, people were spending money before they got it, expecting this money too.
Well, that's bad. It's bad business.
So Zep and Ron.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I was just wondering if we allocate this money, wouldn't that lock that money in? I mean, if we lock this money and got it sent out, then there'd be nobody fighting for that money because we've allocated it and got it out.
That's a Don and probably John question.
Well, there's a complicated answer to that, but yes, in all likelihood, Zeb, that would be the case. It would be a lot more difficult for the legislature to make a decision to pull money away from from folks that have already had it allocated.
So what I like to see is just less opportunity for that to happen. For sure. So whatever gets the money out to the providers the fastest. I would hate to see us go through some other hiccups and then end up being vulnerable again to attacks for people trying to get the money.
So real quick, since it's a lot of dissension in this decision making, it's not like straightforward, and we're gonna vote. We kind of can we shift to validating the other vote that we have to make and revisit this? I don't know if the council is okay with that, but at least getting another vote in.
Yeah, I never got a chance to.
Go ahead.
So I didn't even remember the fact that the police did try to take $150 million. And that is a great point that I totally forgot about. And when we made the decision last time and we voted the way that we did, the reason why we made that decision is because we thought that it was unfair that these people who applied for this money wouldn't get their full allotted time because of us and because of OHA dropping the ball with the rubrics. And so I just stand on the decision that we made, and I don't think we should cave in the pressure to change it.
Thank you. I got Ron and Carolyn.
Well, I was going to make a motion, but based on what a couple of things I just heard, I'm going to withhold.
Carolyn?
I think we need to have a very good understanding that grants are not guaranteed. Base dollars is different from grants. And so anyone who's applying for a grant, you need to be very careful because grants could go away. The legislature could come in and redirect some of those funds. And so for anyone to depend on grants, that's not probably a good way to think about the future. And so things happen all the time with grants. These are brand new and the timeline has changed. And I think we just need to be very careful because I think we're all talking like this money is here for good, is here forever, and not understanding that this could shift. We could get a new governor and they could shift. We could get new people in the legislature and all that stuff could shift. So never, ever completely be dependent upon grants. That's a big mistake. So I just want to throw that in because of the fact that I think we're having some confusion here in terms of how grants, the process works.
Thank you for that, Carolyn. Ron?
Right. So just in terms of this conversation that we're having, I mean, I just want to address to Caroline's point that, you know, there was significant community pushback on the legislature for trying to take this money that resulted in a full-hearted, full-throated and effective defense of this money that resulted in the legislature backing off, which I can see that happening again. If need be, the council stood up against the legislature, the community stood up against, providers stood up against it, people in the legislature, people in high profile folks in government all over the place stood up against removing and taking this money. And that's likely to happen again, a full-throated defense of this money. So I'm confident that that would happen again and that we would be successful again. And second, just in terms of the proposal on the table, I'm going to go ahead and make the motion that we approve that we continue the 18 months of funding, but allow it to be, but allow the timeline for it to be spent through December of 2023.
So with that motion, well, we had to undo our other vote because we already made a vote. We already made a vote and it passed.
Well, I second Ron's motion to change the other one and amend it to this motion.
Yeah.
This is going to be too much more discussion. So like I said, can we, I mean, we put a motion on the table. I mean,
We have a
I
motion
said
and a
before you
second.
did that, it was a lot of discussion around this, and we're not gonna move to the other vote. But
Yeah,
discussion,
Hey,
because I don't have
let's go to
I don't
discussion.
have information from the people that are speaking that are professionals about why they want us to change our vote. And how is it going to affect these organizations that are waiting on this money and expecting this full amount? Like, why are we being asked to change a vote that on March 2nd we already made a decision? So why are we getting pressure to change it?
Because the money's not getting to them
Amy,
in
hold on,
time.
hold on.
Keisha. No, I waited.
No, Henry has his hand up.
Yeah,
Henry
yeah,
has
we
his
all
hand
have.
up. It's an order operation. Go, Henry.
Yeah, I just want to note the time, it's 3:20 and I'm a little confused as well. And I hear that there's some frustration around confusion. And so perhaps there could be a way we could reach out to, folks at OHA to give some more clarity. Maybe they could draft a memo or something to help us to understand this. And we could simply table the discussion for today and move forward.
So I'm going to move to,
suggestion.
I'm going to table the motion until we get clarification from OHA.
And I like to
you,
make a
Ron.
motion that we get feedback from the organizations who are waiting on this money.
You want to call the next agenda item, Lakeisha?
Yeah, so we are, I think it is the reporting, data reporting. Is that it, Don? I'm sorry,
Yes.
what's the third vote? Validating data report, yeah.
Yes.
yes.
So I'll turn it over to you or whoever's over that presentation.
Okay, that's back to me. This is John again. Wait for Dawn to call it up here. So at the last meeting, as we're waiting for this to come up, we did a kind of high level overview of the data collection, and what we're coming back to you with today is a more specific proposal around how we get to the data that we need to collect based on the statute. So if you go to the next slide, this is just a quick reminder of the values again that Steve presented last time when we were talking about this, and then the slide, and it does emphasize the need for simplicity, and that this is a complex issue that we need to try and break down, and we need to have some focus on particular elements in the data collection and try and balance things over time, given the fact that we are starting fresh with most all of the organizations. Next slide, please. If you'll recall from the Senate Bill 755, we mentioned the fact that there are basically two categories of data. The stuff highlighted in blue are things that we're seeing as system-wide things that we'll need to measure and track, while the information in, I guess that's yellow, are things that we're going to be contractually requiring that are collected from the elements within the burns or the burns itself. We go to the next slide. And this slide basically highlights those things. So we're going to be looking at collecting from the elements of the burns, the number of clients that were served, the numbers of denials, reasons for the denials, demographic data associated with those, and eventually also wait times associated with services, the duration of time that people spend in services, including any reasons for delays, and then what some of the outcomes could be. I'm going to hesitate here a second on the outcome piece, because in a lot of ways, the information above that particular bullet are some of the outcomes, but down the line, there could be a discussion about other kinds of specific outcomes that we might want to track. Next slide. And apropos to that mention of outcomes, collecting this data is, there are elements of it that are fairly straightforward and easy, and then there are other parts that are quite difficult. And if you go to the next slide.
I think we have a hand raised though, John.
Oh, sure. I'm sorry, I can't see.
It's okay. Onisha, is your hand raised?
Yes, I made a motion, but after we vote on whatever he's presenting, then I want to go back to my motion because I don't think he should heard it before he starts speaking.
Okay. So can we go to the next slide? And so some of the examples of basically what we're talking about in terms of easy to difficult is the fact that under the easy category, we might ultimately have an entity that basically does all 7 service elements associated with the burns. That might be fairly easy reporting. It can progress to being more difficult, and then we'll have multiple entities combined to make those 7 elements, and collecting some of the data even at an aggregate level gets a little bit more difficult. And then ultimately where we're heading is probably the most difficult aspect, which is hopefully collecting person level data as opposed to aggregate level data that we'll need basically some time to get there from the easy to the difficult piece. So that goes to the next slide. And I apologize if you're hearing my dogs bark in the background, probably a mailman or something walking by. So what we're proposing here is a phased approach to data collection that takes into account this concept that it goes from being fairly easy to more difficult, and that the more difficult aspect will take some time for us to get there. What we're proposing is a set of steps to get to where we ultimately want to be. And step 1 would start off utilizing the simplest approach, which is collecting basic data around services rendered, clients served, clients denied, and some basic demographics. The next step that we would progress to, and the idea is basically to take all the burns from step 1 to step 2 at the same time, would be the inclusion and collection of real D data and SOGI data. SOGI data is actually still being defined a little bit. The real D data is defined and does actually require quite a bit more detail than typical demographics do. So this would give our grantees some time to get to the point where they can actually start collecting that data. Step 3 would ultimately end up meet the requirements of the statute, and that we would start collecting, in addition to the counts of people and services being rendered, some of the reasons associated with denials, average wait time, average duration, and what some of the outcome counts might be associated with that. And then step 4 is really our ultimate goal, which is where we're, instead of collecting data at an aggregate level, which is the way it would be collected in those previous 3 steps, is to actually collect person level information from the entities involved in being burned, so that we can look at an individual and have a full view of the services that they received, and have the information necessary to do some of the calculations we were asking some of the burns to do previously and submit to us. Over on the right, you can see some of these pros and cons that are listed out associated with this. Probably some of the biggest aspect of the pros is that this is something that can evolve over time and give us time to do technical assistance and allow each of the providers to build up the capacity to get to these more difficult steps. And probably the biggest con associated with this is that we wouldn't necessarily have all the data collected that we wanted at the very start. That could be possible for some of the entities, but we're guessing based on the information that we have that it won't be possible for all of them. So we're proposing back to you as a council that we basically bring everybody along at the same speed. And the fact that there's going to be limited data available across those burns initially is just, I think, more or less a fact that we have to take into consideration here. If you go to the next slide, This basically gives you an idea, though, is if we adopt this step approach or phased approach to the collection of the data, what we'll have at each one of those steps. At each step, we have very valuable information, but as we progress, we basically add additional information. Again, with the hopes that we eventually end up with that individual level data that we can see how services impacted those individuals, rather than basically not being able to compare across the services for a particular individual. So then the next slide is basically a proposed motion, which we could get to after we stop here and see what questions folks may have had. And I can't see anything. Oh, go ahead.
Blue has her hand up.
Yep, I am just concerned really with harm reduction programs, collecting this data. A lot of this will be a barrier for people to get sterile needles and naloxone. And I can totally see in the other categories where insurance is being billed or people are getting a lot more intensive services where this might not be a barrier, but if people are doing harm reduction, or also if the burns are doing outreach to places like camps, it's not going to be appropriate to collect a lot of this information. It's not trauma informed. And that's my only concern. I don't think it would be a barrier for a lot of the other services we're funding, but I'm really worried about outreach and harm reduction.
So that's a really great point, Blue. And one of the pieces that I did not go into detail here, as I was just presenting as an overview, is that, you know, both as we're starting and as we hopefully eventually get to person level data where appropriate, we're going to get this information by the different types of elements, including harm reduction, low barrier substance use services, peer services. And one of the things that I think we'll definitely encounter is the fact that some of the data needing to be collected isn't appropriate across all of the various elements like you're describing for harm reduction. And I think, again, having this kind of step approach where we're evaluating what we're collecting at each step allows us some time to kind of evaluate that and make some changes and recommendations back out to the entities that are parts of burns to report to us. So it could be, without having to state it right now, it could be that we basically make that differentiation you were describing.
Are you done, Blue? Henry has his hand up and Blue's done.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we are collecting accurate information about services being provided so that we can make sure that we're not misappropriating funds from the tax-paying folks. I also think that, you know, the concept of trauma-informed care is something that's very specific and clinically defined. And I think we can access this information from folks who are choosing to access services, because that's the point of trauma-informed care, is that, you know, we're protecting somebody's sense of self-determination. So if they're wanting to access care, they can also, you know, we can also gain some information about the type of care they're getting and make sure that we're providing good care to folks in Oregon. Thanks.
Yeah, the quick comment I'd make to that, Henry, is that, I mean, what you're describing, I think, is why we eventually want to get to this step 4 in these phases, because it will allow us to track an individual across the types of services they might engage with and see what the impact is. You know, until we get to that step 4 and that step 3, while that meets statutory requirements, we will only be able to look at stuff in aggregate associated with a particular type of service. So that's a good point. If there aren't any other questions, we can go to the next slide. And this is where we put forward a possible motion that you might consider. where the OAC authorizes OHA to develop and include in grant agreements a phased approach to meeting all the data elements. And one thing I didn't mention also that as far as going back to the grant agreement that y'all voted on previously, in the section associated with data elements, we basically left that blank, and we're working on inserting some language that would, instead of define all the elements within the grant agreement, which would therefore lock us into the elements and when they're needing to be done, it will make reference to our website, the Measure 110 website, which we'll end up putting all of those details. So it doesn't need to be part of the grant agreement initially, but as we're doing the negotiations and before they're signed, we'll need to have something up on our website that basically describes this.
So any final questions for John? Anybody want to make this motion?
I'll move it.
Second. Any discussion?
May we have the PowerPoint taken down so that we can assure that we have quorum? Thank you.
Seeing no, Sabrina.
Yeah, I just wanted to reference back to what you said about collecting the data sometimes out in the field. I know in my area is a little bit rough to get information from people when you're trying to engage them in services doing harm reduction work. And so I just wanted to point that out again.
Okay, we still have 15 folks, so we can take a vote.
All right, seeing no more hands, Walter.
Let's do it. Okay. Amy, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thanks, Amy. Blue?
No.
Okay. Carlos?
Yes.
Okay. Caroline?
Yes.
Okay. Elwin? Ooh, excuse me. Henry? Hubert? Keisha?
Yes.
Leticia?
Yes.
Melinda?
Yes.
Morgan?
Yes.
Nicole?
Yes.
Onisha?
Yes.
Ron?
Yes.
Sabrina?
I abstain.
Okay. Zeb?
Yes.
Okay. So far we've got 11. Is Hubert here or am I missing him?
He's there. Maybe he's muted you.
Hubert, can you hear us? Can you come off mute? And Henry?
Henry logged off.
Yeah, Henry had to run to a meeting.
Okay.
Oh,
I hear you.
Hubert.
Oh, Hubert, how do you vote?
We got a special one.
Yeah, it's not. Hello?
Yep. How do you vote?
Well, I vote yes.
Okay.
Did y'all get it?
We have 12.
Hello?
Yep. I got your vote. I got your vote.
All right. Sorry, I'm at work, so I do something. All right.
Reached out to Aowen to see if she is able to step back in.
And then we had somebody that said no. That was blue. So right now we're at 12, Angela.
Are we at 12 yeses,
12 yeses.
1 abstention and 1 no? I
Yep,
need one more vote.
I will try to give Aowen a quick phone call and see if I can get a hold of her.
This is Steve. I just want to double check. I believe I count for quorum, even though I'm a non-voting member. Do we achieve quorum with my presence?
Yep, we do. But I don't know if that means you, I think Allison probably would weigh in, because if from that would give it, oh, there goes Sabrina.
It would be a majority.
Sabrina?
Yeah, I was just wondering if it was majority. I wasn't, part of my, if I could talk about it real quick while we're waiting for some other people, would we have a movement in the harm reduction section at some time for the way we gather information, or is that tied into Senate Bill 755?
I don't know if we could open another discussion in the middle of a vote, though. I'm not sure 100%, but.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'll
finish the
just wait.
vote.
To other people.
Yeah, Walter, finish the vote. What's the count?
We're at 12.
12 yes
12 yes.
of 15 present. The motion carries, right?
The motion carries. Majority.
Okay, good, thank you. Then you don't need to address my comment. I was confused about what we were doing. I apologize.
So motion carries, yes, for the data collection part. So we got two votes accomplished. We got 2 votes accomplished.
Do we still have Allison on the line to confirm
Yeah,
that?
hold on. Yeah, we got to confirm this with Allison. Allison?
Sure,
Allison, we
so
have, oh, go ahead.
go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say we have 12 yeses, 1 abstention, 1 no, and 1 member who has not been able to provide a vote. And we are wondering if that means
That's a no vote.
Or an abstention. So 2 abstentions, 1 no, 12 yes. Is that a motion that carries?
Yes, this we've established that there's quorum, correct?
Yes.
Yes, we have 15.
Perfect. Yeah, because Steve does count toward quorum, even though Steve can't vote. So, okay, yeah, that the motion should pass based on that.
Okay.
Okay.
Just
Thank
wanted to
you
make
so
sure.
much.
Okay, the motion carries and passes.
So, Don, was there anything else pressing? I think Onisha had something after that. Are we finished with that discussion?
Yeah, that the data piece is done.
Okay. Onisha, did you still have something?
Yeah, I was just it's a lot trying to work and then pick up these kids from preschool. So I think I missed some stuff, but I don't know if it's possible. Yeah, it's a lot. So I don't know if it's even possible, but is there any way we can make a motion to hear from the people who are waiting on this money who would like to attend and voice their concerns as part of the subcommittee council? Because they have been waiting for a long ass time. And when we were chose to sit on this council, we were chosen because we're representative of consumers. And also many of us work in this field, and we're looking at it from a council, you know, perspective. We got to get this work done. We got to be equitable. We have to think of all of the organizations involved. But I don't think we've ever paused to do a listening session about how the length of time that it's taken to get these funds out has affected them. And I don't think that we're making these decisions on the strength of those most impacted by the war on drugs and the organizations who represent those populations. Is there any way that we can have a listening session only to listen to how they feel about some of these decisions that we're making? I don't feel comfortable making these decisions lightly that affect especially the proposals that we are awarding, because they did the work, they followed directions, and they are being awarded. And I don't feel comfortable making decisions lightly that is going to delay or take away from an 18-month amount of funding that they applied for because of us. So my motion out of all that is, can we have a listening session with these organizations who are waiting?
So do you want to ask a question or make a statement motion?
So I'm making a
What is a
motion.
question and then, okay.
Okay, yeah, and I want to make a motion, and nobody has to second me, but that's okay. But I want to make a motion that we, the subcommittee, have a listening session with all of these organizations who are willing to be a part of it about some of these decisions that we are making that are affecting their funding.
May I interject?
Yeah.
So because we are still in an open RFGA process and there is a requirement for a single point of contact, I don't believe that we would be able to have a listening session at this time because it would potentially change some of the decisions that the council makes around the RFGA. If that is incorrect, anyone please let me know, but that is my understanding.
Have you guys been able to, is there any way that we can hear the concerns of the people that we're supposed to be serving in this process? Because what I feel is like, this is how I feel. I feel like we're all under a tremendous amount of pressure. We all know we're behind deadlines. We're all working our ass off to get this money out, and we're all making decisions based on pressure, based on information that is being thrown at us that half of us don't understand completely, because sometimes it's not given to us in layman terms, and we're under pressure to make decisions that will affect the amount of money these people are receiving, will affect how long that they're going to be receiving it, and we're supposed to make these decisions lightly. Today, we were asked to revisit a decision we made on March 2nd. And to this whole 4-hour meeting or 3-hour meeting, I still am unclear as to why staff asked us to revisit that decision.
I will say I hear you and I understand the desire to hear from community and how this will impact them. It totally makes sense. And we can think about how we might go about doing that and also maintain the RFGA process. But I don't know that we'll be able to give an answer to that today. I do promise that we will ask and we will find out what we can do and what is within our power while also maintaining RFGA. But I think that at this point, that's probably the best answer I can give you.
Thank you.
Okay, I see hands at this point. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Keisha.
I was gonna say, I think at this point, we've come to the end. I don't think we have time to open up any other discussion at this point, and get out of here. So what do you propose we do, Angela?
Well, I don't know that we have enough time to open up a conversation about negotiations at this point and get anywhere solid with that. I do see Sabrina's hand is up as well as Caroline. Perhaps we could just take those two questions or comments.
I'm sorry, I couldn't see that.
I don't think my hand is up. This
It
is
is,
Sabrina.
but it might be left over from a previous moment.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'll take it down.
That's okay. It's okay. Caroline.
I think we have to understand that the accountability board was put together with a cross-section of people for us to be the voice of the people. So if we want to meet with our own different folks within our own communities and want to listen, I think that's totally up to us. To put it on this platform, I don't know how we could even do something like that, because if we didn't get the money out and people are concerned, we're not going to have a beneficial meeting. We're going to have nothing but criticism. And I think we have to be realistic. We are the voice of the people. We were put on this accountability council to be the voice of the people. And so all we could do is the best that we can. No one said this was going to be easy. And so I'm not in agreement that we open this up to everyone else. These are open meetings. If people have some concerns, they could, I don't know, there's some time at the end usually for open comments from the community. And I think that's the appropriate place. I'm not willing to spend hours and hours and hours listening to concerns when I think we could come to the same conclusion. So I'm not in favor of opening this up to a whole different forum. I think that's up to us as our individual to we represent different sectors, and we need to bring those concerns, I think, to the table ourselves.
Anisha.
Carolyn brought up an excellent point. So can we get a clear understanding of the time for open comments at the end of these meetings and how we can get those read to us? Like if people are watching this on YouTube Live or being shared with us, because I think Karen Wheeler has been very vocal about getting some of those comments. And I don't think we've even been receiving them via email or in a private chat message. There's no way we have access to those. Or if we do have access to those, I'm ignorant personally. I'm speaking for myself. I don't know how to access those comments.
All of the comments are open and available to you, except the ones in regards to the RFGA, because we're still in the open RFGA. We cannot share any comments that come from organizations who are applicants, but all other comments are open and available.
On YouTube?
You mean from, I'm speaking of the comments that come into the Measure 110 inbox. Is that the ones that you meant?
Well, I think Carolyn said that this is an open meeting and people can make public comments. So how can we access those public comments in real time?
Okay, so as in comments that are maybe under the YouTube link on YouTube?
Is that the only place that they're put?
Angela, I think that we still need instructions about how to access those public comments like that Karen talked about and we put, but we just need to send out another email explaining how to access those.
Yes.
Are you done, Anisha?
Yes.
Okay, Blue.
I think that actually kind of covered it, but just to clarify, my understanding is this is not a public meeting and public cannot comment in Measure 110 meetings anywhere. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. We have no members of the public joining us for meetings, only OAC members and OHA staff as needed. So there's not really a way to have members of the public join us in this Zoom link. The public comments are those that come into the Measure 110 inbox, and perhaps the public comments that might be attached to any YouTube links that are out there, although I don't know that commenting is enabled on those YouTube links. And regarding state emails, yes, you can and will have access to them. We are working on putting together a TA session to help you all access them if you choose to use them. And through that email, we would be able to have you access the public comments that come into the Measure 110 inbox. All right. It is 3:55. It has been a day of much intense conversation. Thank you so much for letting us move forward with the MOUs, with the contracts, and with the data decision. Very much appreciate your work on that. We will get moving on building those contracts for your awardees and getting those out to them for negotiations as soon as possible. Are there any last thoughts before we wrap up the meeting for today?
All right. I think we should adjourn the meeting. My chairs, you have anything else to say before we adjourn?
I'd just like to say
Did you
something
have
real
a
quick.
comment? Hold on. Melinda, did you have a comment?
No,
Okay, go Zeb.
I'd like to say thank you to my fellow council members for all the hard work that you're putting in. This has been a lot of hard work, and I know we're passionate about this stuff. And I'd also like to say thank you to the OHA staff for all the work that you guys are putting in behind the scenes. It really means a lot. So just thank you to everybody here.
I second that.
Thank you.
I third that.
We appreciate you too.
All
Thanks
right.
for
meeting
everything.
Yeah,
adjourned.
my only comment, I
Oh,
only
go
have
ahead,
one
Ron.
comment, which is just to remind folks that these are public meetings and that even though we are very passionate and very animated people, that it's really important that we do everything we can to maintain our composure and respectful discourse and tone and manner as we have these conversations. We just need to remind ourselves that we as individuals have to hold ourselves accountable to maintain composure and tone and respectful dialogue. That's my final comment. Thanks.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you, Ron. And we can't judge somebody's composure and professionalism and where they stand either. So we have to be compassionate about people coming from different places.
That's exactly my point, is we're accountable to ourselves, not to me.
All right.
Okay.
Adjourn.
Right. You all